I'm also a mentor on the platform as well as background. So I just asked if everyone say their name, where they're from, and if they're a mentor or entrepreneur. So we have a little bit of sense of who's joining.
Well, hello, my name is Eugenia, and I'm an entrepreneur. I think I was the first generation of Bridge for Billions back in, I don't know which year. And yeah, my project is about helping people find a fulfilling work life, and that sometimes involves starting their own projects. They're not entrepreneurs. I mean, they don't believe themselves as entrepreneurs, but I think I need to, I don't know what's the word in English, acompañar, or whatever the word is, in this also, no, in the customer journey, like teach them as well about all these things.
Great, thanks. Do you have one or two people who want to speak up?
Hi, my name is Akshay. I'm from India. I work for an AI startup, and Anna is my mentor here.
Great, nice to have you.
Thank you.
We have one more introductory, and then we'll get moving.
Yeah, sorry. I'm Gabriel. Sorry, my video is not so good. The light is
okay, we hear you.
I'm Gabriel from Nigeria. I hope you can hear me.
Yep, we can.
Okay. Okay, so I'm an entrepreneur, just joined Bridge for Billions, and I'm here to learn what's going on. Yeah, thank you. Great.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think we're going to have to stop, or else we'll run out of time for everyone. But welcome to everyone who's joining. I have a pretty informal nature of presenting. If you have questions at any point, please feel free to interrupt. I will also try and stop at points where I think it's appropriate to ask for questions, because if we save them all till the very end, I think it might be too much. Building a customer journey can be a very overarching experience, or a very, very detailed one, you know? So I'm going to talk about both kinds, but I think once we get to the detailed part, you'll likely have some specific questions. So please feel free to interrupt, or as Alex said, write in the chat at any time. Okay, great. So the topic is customer journey, but I actually want to start from the concept of customer experience. I think there's a lot of misconception out there around what is customer experience. One of the problems is because the answer is everything. It really is, what is the customer's experience of you, of your company, of your product, of your brand, with it can be directly in contact with you, indirectly, through other people, what they're hearing, what they're seeing through advertising, etc. So a lot of times you hear people talking about customer experience as if it were only, say, about the user's experience on your digital product or on your website. But that's actually what we call UX, right? And UX lives within customer experience. Customer experience is this much broader shell of really everything. And you can see here on the screen all possible interactions. Another misconception I see often is people thinking that customer experience is just about marketing and only the marketing team's responsibility. And I think that's a really big mistake. I think everyone in your company should be aware of this concept, and the best customer experiences come from teams that are really well integrated and understand what each are doing. So the different areas that this could come from are directly through customer service, which is a real direct contact point with your customers, right? But there's many, many other, the obvious ones are marketing and sales maybe, or actually direct contact with your product or service. But I like to highlight the smaller ones here. Depending on how you organize your company, operations can be a very internal role, but at a lot of companies, operations has a lot to do with the users as well. So that's one. And then the two that I think people most often skip over is even HR, like the way you act as a company and the way your employees are onboarded and your values and your mission and your philosophy really bleeds into how you treat your customers and how you see your customers as well. So like all of these things really touch into customer experience and how people experience your products and your company and your brand as well. And of course, strategy, you know, if strategy sets the ship for everything. So it absolutely has to do with customer experience as well. So this is just an overview. I mean, we could have a whole webinar on what customer experience is and different areas in which it can interact. But I think the key takeaway is that it only really works well when everyone is very connected and aware of maybe the overall strategy, their overall direction and philosophy in which you work with your customers. So that brings us a little bit to customer journey. There's a lot of questions out there as well about what is a customer journey. And the three things I'm going to just touch on to get started are the different types. I mean, there's many, many different types. This is really a simplification. But for the sake of time, there are some customer journeys that are very overarching, like the one you see here, which is just about taking an approach to seeing what the emotions of your customer might be at a different touch point with them. And the phases can be, you can add as many phases as you'd like, but this is about doing like, what are all the phases that our customers go through on a very overarching level, and how do they feel when they're doing that? Maybe how are they having the contact with us? Here you can see on the screen, there's a phone call, a mobile, maybe an email or an actual letter, and just some notes at the bottom about what is the customer's perspective at each of these points. This is, I don't know if any of you have ever seen this, but this is a very common visual when we talk about what is customer journey, because it's really the simplest one. It's most tangible to just get your feet wet with doing customer journeys. The next example I want to show you is actually one that we make here internally, and this doesn't follow any methodology. This is not, there's no theory behind this. We really have a very practical, actual map of what our customers do. And since we're a digital product, as you know, a lot of the things you'll see have to do with app screen, website screen, is it a pop-up, is it an email, these kinds of things. But if we had a different type of business, our key might include things like in-person visit, phone calls, store interaction, and things like this. I don't want to dive too much into this. It's just to show you that a customer journey can also be something very practical, which is really just for our internal team and for our design phase of understanding what are all the actual mini interactions that a user goes through. The only thing I want to really touch on are like the phases we chose to use here are what our entrepreneurs actually go through. So it's coming into contact with us and applying, having an interview, being accepted or not, going through the matching process with mentors, being on the platform, incubating. So just in contrast, we have the simple one, which is very overarching and about emotions and the customer's perspective, a super practical version of a customer journey, which is really just sitting down with your team and putting all the things your company does with a user. And then what we're going to talk about today is customer journey as an ideation tool. So I tried to make it much prettier than what you're seeing on the screen now. It might be a little overwhelming, but this is like the future end version of what a really extensive, detailed customer journey map can look like. But what I mean by ideation tool is using this process of building a customer journey, not so much in a practical way, but more as an approach of what are all the ways it could happen. When we talk about how could a customer come into contact with us, instead of what are the ways they do come into contact with us today, so really taking this step of thinking about future or possible versions or discarding options that might not work for you and getting kind of really creative. So yeah, those are like the three groups that I chose to mark today. Before we get into exactly like the real content of like using customer journey as an ideation tool, does anyone have any questions just in general about customer journeys or even customer experience? Yeah. Or do you want to?
Oh, I can.
Julie is here with us and she has a question.
Hi, I'm also from the Bridge team, but something that I like, Allie really changed our customer journey. She came in May last year, and there has been a big one after her. Like, this has been a transformation. And my question would be more generally, and I think that can interest other people. Do you need to do it before, like planning everything and forgetting about your current customer and starting from zero? Or is it better to start with what you know and what you have already from a customer and diverge from there? That would be my main question if I had to start from scratch today.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always easier to start from what you know. I'm not very fond of halves, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
You can do both, you can start from zero as a pure ideation tool if you don't even know yet. You might be quite lost if you don't know who your customers are, because that really changes how you answer. So at a minimum, you should identify your customer groups and be at a stage where you know who your number one target is to do this appropriately. You also should know which product or service you're focusing on, but beyond that, you don't need anything. It's interesting though when you do use something as a base, like to map what is our current and what could our future be. Like what is our current is helpful as a base, but I would really challenge you to throw it out the window, as this expression we have, about like, it doesn't matter what we did before, what could we do? I think this is where you have the most interesting experience. That being said, you can go really in depth with what you already know, right? Like what you know and what your practices already are help you think about new things, whereas just making something up out of thin air is kind of complicated as well. But this is similar to like when you're trying to decide what business model you should have. I think looking at what other companies do, and not just other companies that are the same as you, is really interesting for inspiration. You know, like every company probably has some element of customer service, no matter what type of company they are. So taking a look at how someone does their customer service phase, or how someone does their phase of attracting, and taking these ideas and building them in. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah.
I tried. Anyone else? Okay, cool. We'll go to the next one. So why do a customer journey? Why is this relevant? There's so many reasons, but I think the main ones are in terms of planning, and trying to build like a concrete path and plan, and to unify your employees and your internal team around that plan. On top of that, understanding better both internally what's happening and externally what the user's experiences are of your company. But honestly, these are two important things, but they're actually my least favorite ones. I think the number one reason to do a customer journey, and this goes towards what I was talking about using customer journey as an ideation tool, is to map out all of this, map out your ideas, and use every piece of this process as a way to get insights. So that could be insights about where you should be doing something different, where you're not doing it because you realize your customer needs or wants something different. Insights about your internal team and how you're operating, and how maybe you're making mistakes there or not doing things so efficiently. So I don't know, if you take one thing from this webinar, I hope it's this idea that mapping out a customer journey in whatever capacity can help you to take insights away, and action, and use them as action pieces for going forward. So that's all the why, and we will get started with step by step of how to do a customer journey in the way that I'm choosing, with the really complex one that's all about ideation. So first and foremost, as I just said to Julie's question, you can't really do this exercise at all if you don't know which product or service you're focusing on and which customer segment. I mean, at a minimum, you need the product and service, right? And then minimum plus one is knowing which customer you're talking about, because it really can dramatically change how your customer journey looks. I'll just use our Bridge for Billions as an example. We have the same product, which is our product and service, which is the incubation program. And our two main customer segments for that are the entrepreneurs and the mentors, right? And the customer journey we build for the entrepreneurs is radically different from the one we built for the mentors, even though both parties are using the same product. So yeah, please keep that in mind for sure before you start. And then there's many stages of building a customer journey, but today we're only going to focus on the first three, which is the phases which the customers pass through, the stages or ways that they pass through those things, and the steps they need to take to complete those ways of those phases. Beyond that, and the only reason we're not going to go into the rest is really because of time and depth. The other ones are, though, getting into the channels by which these people have contact with you, whether it's physical, digital, or a number of many other ways of getting into the specifics of, is it on a mobile device? Is it on which mobile device? Through which browser? These kinds of questions. Is it in a store? Is it in-person touch with a friend or something like that? The emotions that the customers have at each stage, and then the contrast between the customer's objective and the company or business's objective at any point. So these things are kind of out of the scope of today's call, but just be aware that they do exist. So yeah, the top three, starting with the first one, which is phases. This is kind of like the structure of your entire customer journey. It's the very first level. So it's the phases that the customer or user goes through before, during, and after coming into contact with your product, company, or brand. I like to focus always on product, though, because your company can have many products, and again, the journeys are different per product, right? So the one thing I want to highlight here is the before, during, and after, right? So this is not just about the customer or user's experience while they're actually using your product or service. This is about everything, the whole scope, from before they ever even knew you existed, to just hearing that maybe you're out there, all the way to after they've used you and going on into the future and talking about you or continuing to interact with you, you know? So the whole scope is what we're going for here. With phases, I have three levels here, going from cool, which means they're either not in contact with you at all, or to lightly in contact with you, meaning they're aware of you. But the reason the first one is gray is need arises. So this actually has nothing to do with you or your company or your product at all. This is about the user or customer's need for the thing that you offer. So maybe they need to drink something, and you're Coca-Cola. Okay, they have a need to drink something, but they might choose water or something else, or, you know, there's many options out there when the need arises. So the need is kind of like this static thing. It's the origin point of how they might start thinking about coming into contact with you or asking friends about options, or looking for options to solve the situation or problem they have right then, you know. But so need arises is very unique as compared to all the other phases. From there forward, there's is aware, considers, and prefers. And actually a note about these phases is that you can put other ones in there, and you can even break these down further. There's no real rules. What I'm showing you right now is what's common. A lot of this is taken from how a marketing funnel works, if you're familiar with that. So these might look familiar to you because of that. Like all 4 of these actually come directly from the marketing funnel, or like the commonly accepted marketing and funnel of first things first. The person has to know you exist, whether they casually heard about that, they saw it online, they stumbled upon your product or service in another way. Then there's consider, prefers. These are in blue because it's just kind of cool. They either have no idea you exist, or they lightly are aware of you, all the way up to prefers, where they're aware of you and they really like you. Into warm, which is where they might actually purchase, choose, buy your product, getting it, using it, and actually needing support on the product. And then hot comes in more to, they've already used it, they've already gone through all the phases of using it, because there's many possibilities there. And then they're on to a loyalty phase, right, where they're recommending and maybe repeat purchasing. At this point, there's actually, I just want to point, like, the ones on the top here are ones I'm saying like are common, right? These are just like most businesses have these phases. And just, again, you don't have to have all of these. But some examples of ones that not everyone has, that some might, are returns, which is more in the cool phase, right? Because they were warm and maybe they give it back. Onboarding, and if your product or service requires an onboarding for users. Exchanges, which is similar to return, but means they want actually something from you in exchange, so we keep it in the warm area. And then other ones that are more in the hot category, that they really love you and they're super loyal, or they're upgrading, or they're becoming strong advocates for your products. There's many, many others, you know, like I don't want to limit you to just what I'm showing on the screen. These are really just the most common ones that get used over and over again. But at this area of phases, I really do challenge you, when you're thinking about what your business is, try and step outside the box a little bit of what else, what's missing, you know, like my company does something really different that isn't on this list, and add it, you know, like just add one more phase. I'm gonna do a little bit of like highlighting just specific things where I know there tends to be some confusion. Is aware is probably one of the broadest categories on the entire phases list, because if you think about it, there's hundreds of ways that people can become aware of you. And aware that you exist. So this is the one that you should go really crazy. Like, don't feel weird if you maybe have 15, 20, 30 things in this is aware category of ways that people become aware of you. Considers and prefers, I often get a lot of questions, or I hear a lot of questions about what's the difference really between consider and prefer. I would say aware is just like so non-committal, it's just I know it exists. Considers is I'm actively like thinking about this, or I took some little bit of interest in this. And prefers is I'm very interested, I'm close to purchasing, and I'm directly comparing you. I think there's many definitions out there, you know, please don't take what I'm saying as like gospel. But this is an easy way of understanding. So every piece along the phase is just getting closer and closer to committing, to choosing. The next little thing to highlight is this whole area of buys, receives. I chose to put the word buys on the map, but really I could have written chooses, because sometimes there's customers that don't actually purchase anything from you, but are choosing your product or service and committing to using it. You know, there's also a difference between maybe I make a reservation to use your product, but I actually haven't paid for it yet. So that's a good example of a company that might have another extra phase in their journey, which is like reserves, and actually purchases, which is the actual payment. And paying might come after receiving in that case. Like when you stay at a hotel, you don't pay for your hotel stay until after you've already used the product, right? So the order you see on the screen also isn't constant, you know, like depending on your particular business, feel free to move the phases out of order or in a different order that suits your actual company. yeah, that was the main point I wanted to make there. And then uses as well is sometimes tricky because you could have a one-time use product. You could have a product that someone buys once in their lifetime and uses it over the entire course of their lifetime. You could have maybe a software, you know, where this person's using it every single day, but the license runs out within a year or something like this. So again, uses is very dynamic, and feel free to break this uses phase into categories that make sense for your particular business. I think, okay, yeah. So any questions about phases before we move to the next step? Cool. I'll keep going. So the next piece down on customer journey mapping is about, just to give you an overview, I'm just going to define the three first with these examples, and then we'll get into some real examples and get into the nitty gritty a little bit. And I might even ask you about your own businesses. Also, I can't see the time, so just remind me. Yeah. Okay, cool. Next is stages and ways. So below the phases, you have the ways in which the people, the users, customers, whichever, get in that phase or go through that phase. So it's stages if there's like different things they have to do to go through that phase, but I like ways better just to put it in context. You know, what are the ways in which a person becomes aware of you? What are the ways in which a person begins to consider you? What are the ways in which a person gets support from you? And there could be many, many, many ways. So this is really a divergent stage where you should be writing as many things as you can think of. For need arises, as I said, this phase kind of stops just with how the need arises, and then we move on because it's not so interesting to us, all the rest of the details underneath there, but all of the other ones have more things much below that. But anyway, to put into context what I'm saying is that for need arises, the question that you would be answering at the stages and ways phase would be, how does this need arise? What are the different ways that this need arises? And there might be some that have like 2 stages for how the same need arises. So you just block them into top and bottom there, how I have. I think it's always better to do one all the way across, but there's just some unique situations in which you need 1 or 2 on top of each other, or 3 even. So again, like a lot of this is very individual and very personal to your business. So don't feel that it's like anything I'm presenting to you should be a blocker for how you do yours. You know, you could have literally a blank piece of paper and just go crazy with it. I'm just trying to find a way to present it in one way, but yeah, don't be limited by the structure of what's being shown exactly. So the question and the ways at each phase, like the stages and ways level, is what are all of the ways that a customer user can X, right? Like what are all of the ways that they might be able to recommend you? Some of the things I have on the screen here are just some examples. I like to group them because there's many things that are like online and different ways online, to friends and different ways in friends. I've also seen customer journeys that actually have another like level between phase and ways, where they just put online, and then under online, they have all the ways you can do it online. I like it this way because it's just a little more organized, but that's definitely another option. So what are the ways a customer user might recommend your product or service to someone else? Online on Facebook, online on Google, online on Quora, to a friends in a casual conversation, to friends by personally showing them the product or service or bringing them on the experience that you offer, to friends by sending them a message. And honestly, here you could probably diverge even more and say, what kind of message? Is it an email? Is it a WhatsApp message? Is it a text message? Is it a voicemail? I think this is a little excessive, you know, but like you can always be the judge of how deep you want to go and how many options you really want to list. And then unless there are any questions about stages and ways, I'll just move to the last one. You might have more questions actually too when I get to actually showing you full examples. Anybody? There's no chats, right? Yeah? Okay, cool. So steps is the last piece we're going to touch on today, and the steps are underneath the ways, and they're the actual steps that the user needs to take in order to do that way or complete that way. Meaning, if I said the phase is recommends, right? And the question was, how can someone recommend you? And we take the one answer that was given, which was someone could send a recommendation online via Facebook. The steps level answers the question, what does the customer have to do in order to recommend you in that way? So here it would actually be, if someone wants to recommend me on Facebook, they have to be online to begin with, right? And this might sound basic, but I think it's really important to put yourself in the customer's shoes and go all the way back to what does that person need to do what I'm saying they probably will do or could do. So be online, has to have Facebook and be on Facebook. And then what do they actually do to be doing a recommendation on Facebook? It means they're writing a post, so they're actually typing out text. And when they're posting it, they also might add an image. I'm sure there's more details you could add here, but I think you get the idea. I think at this level, people start to think, wow, this is really detailed. Like, does it really need to get that detailed? I would argue yes, and the reason is for the insights, right? So bringing everything back to these insights, by doing this exercise, and especially going exhaustively out of like, what are all the ways that someone might recommend me, is good, right? Because you think of things you might not have thought of before. But when you actually do the exercise of putting yourself into the customer's shoes and going one by one of what does that person really have to do in order to recommend me, you start to think about, wow, am I even on Facebook? You know, what does my Facebook profile look like? If someone wanted to tag me in that post, like type in my business to tag me, would they be able to do that? Beyond that, is it easy to find me on Facebook even if I have a profile? Then other questions that might arise are interesting. So people probably are talking about me publicly. How do I find those posts? And I should be monitoring those things if I'm not already. Or how can I collect what they're saying and use that in another way? Or should I be responding to what people are saying? And it's a strategic decision and a company decision to decide, do we respond to people's public posts or not? So these are all very granular details, but they matter, right? Because these are ways that people interact with you. And if you're not even aware that they're interacting in this way because you didn't do this thought exercise, then you miss an opportunity to either build a better relationship with them or convert more people or reach more contacts. So the insights, I think, is the most important part and really the reason behind all of this. So if we don't have any questions about the architecture, I'm going to give a real example, which I think will actually help put everything into context.
We have two questions.
Yeah.
Miguel asked about the previous stage. That can we influence how we would be recommended? If yes, how? And then Gabrielle, I like the thought process, really brings out the details.
So can we influence how we would be recommended? If yes, how? Absolutely, for sure. And part of the benefit of doing an exercise like journey mapping is understanding all the possible ways that someone could recommend and doing the thought exercise of which one do we prefer, actually, and how do we build a system that pushes people to do it a certain way. I would say that the later stage of journey mapping, though, so after you have everything laid out on the table, then you take a look at, okay, there's 20 ways someone can recommend us. Which are the top 3 we care most about? What are the ways that we push our users to recommend in the way that we care more about? For example, if you want more publicity on Google versus Facebook because you know you have a larger audience on Google, then you would set up a system to push users that way. I probably can't go any further into answering that because it depends so much on your business and what channels, but for sure you can influence these things. Yeah, so I'll use a real example. So Bamboo Booth is a company that has a portable photo booth that you can rent for a cheaper than average price to have at your personal event. So like you can see, it's very modern, pretty small. It's not like a big clunky thing like old photo booths. And so they have a challenge of being this new idea, new concept of when people even come to the point of wanting or needing a photo booth, what's going to make them choose Bamboo Booth, right? So in the case of this company, they have a photo booth, which on the top left you see is the product, and the target customer that they're focusing on for this journey is the young professional. This young professional, and need arises, the work here is to challenge yourself. In what situation could this customer segment need what my product or service, or want my product or service? Be careful, because sometimes it's need and sometimes it's want, right? Needs are more powerful for sure, but wants, definitely a lot of business is done just around wants. So they are having a party, maybe they're getting married, which I guess is a party as well, but a different kind of party, right? Maybe they're decorating an office space, and this one you see has 2 levels, because when you're decorating an office space, you probably don't need a photo booth, right? But for this to pertain to my product, the reason why they need or might be interested in my product is because they're not only decorating an office space, but in that context, they're looking for a fun, modern, interactive item. And then the last one I have here is hosting a work event, and they maybe wanted to put something more dynamic there. There's many more that could probably come, but I just wanted to convey, to get the point across of what is the need for this person. If you have a different customer profile there, their needs might be completely different. So really important to remember that when you're doing your journey, and to not lose context of which customer is this about. The next phase is that this same customer, same situation, like you should always be using the same product and the same customer as you continue through and not jumping around between the different ones. So this person has this need, right? And we're gonna pick like, okay, they are getting married. And they decide, I want entertainment for my wedding because I'm getting married. What are the things I might do in order to figure out what kind of entertainment that I want? I might ask friends directly for recommendations. And below that, there's many ways they might ask their friends, right? Online search, I might just Google it. Another type of online search is I might go on Instagram and search in a different way. I also potentially have used either this product or a product like it at an event, which causes me to be aware that this option even exists, right? There's many, many more that could be listed, but for the sake of time, we're focusing on these ones. Then sticking with this same product, same person, and just gonna zoom in on one to show you how detailed we can really get here, is that, so there's many different ways I could have become aware. Two that I listed of online, even though there's probably like 7 or 8 more legitimate ones too. And of all the ways I can search online, I'm gonna go into the Googling, right? So what do I have to do in order to Google? So it's like this person becomes aware of me, may become aware of me by Googling. This is always like the thought exercise of going backwards, up the line, right? So you want to put yourself in the shoes of a person who has no idea your company even exists, that maybe even your product is out there. They just know they want a photo booth at their wedding. So they open their internet browser and they type something into Google. After they hit enter, they are scrolling through the results. And then here I actually have a break of alternate things that might happen. So on the left side, we have they're scrolling and they actually find your website and they click on your website and they're on your website. So that means they're on like a new phase, which is in considering. And so that would be the end of this path because they actually went to your site and they're considering. If they just stopped at reading your name on the internet, they're aware you exist, but they didn't actually go anywhere near you because they didn't take the next step of going to considering, right? If we come back to backwards up the path a little bit of saying they're just scrolling through the results that came on Google, they might find a list of reviews of companies like mine, which I'm on, right? So they didn't come directly to my site, but they went to a website that lists top 10 portable photo booths changing the game today. And so then they're reading about your company directly there. And then from there, they might go to your website as well. So again, this is really about minutia, but the point of all of this are the insights. Because number one, what are people searching when they're on Google? You know they're probably Googling you, right? You're probably aware, okay, Google is one way people can find me, but do you know the things that lead people to your site? If you have a site, this is like, what are the real terms? What are the real words that are being put in there? And there's tons of research and even whole teams in companies and ways to discover these things. But just the basic level of knowing that people are doing this and being aware that you need to put some work into understanding what are those search terms is really important, and doing a customer journey and coming down to this level of minutia can help get you there and help discover and get this insight that this is something that I need to act on. Other relevant questions or insights that may have come from this level of going into the details of when I do appear on a search engine. So but there's one possibility that you don't even appear on Google or the first or second or third page. But if you do appear, where are you appearing? What else is appearing around you? What are the terms that are making you appear more or higher or better and all of this? And then below that, and even like deeper questions is like, how can I be improving where I appear on search? And on top of that, kind of like the alternative path here, are there any external reviews of me online? Are there blogs that are writing about what I'm doing? Are there companies reviewing 6 companies like mine, and am I on that list? And if I'm not, what do I do to get on those lists? Or how do I make that happen? So this is just one like micro-focused in example, but just to bring it right back out again, we could have done the exact same exercise for the one right to the left of this, which is ask friends for recommendations. right? So the exercise would have been, if a person is going to ask a friend for a recommendation, how do they do that? And how does their friend respond? And that whole exercise might lead you down a totally different path. I will say, though, that often things in the same category lead you to the same insights and the same conclusions. For example, if I asked my friend for a recommendation and they sent me your Instagram profile or something like this, really what I still need is probably your website or your direct contact information. And so if your website's not out there or not optimized, then I might have trouble finding you, etc., which is probably the same conclusion you come to when you go down this Google path as well. Not always, but I would say it's more common than not that you start to repeat your insights. So yeah, that's the Bamboo Booth example at a very high level of the awareness level, but then there's the direct contact level of like after they've made the decision, and just because at the different phases of your journey, it is really, the map starts to look really different. For example, in the awareness, there could be 20, 30 and plus entries, but receives, maybe there's probably not so many ways someone can receive the product. For example, with the Bamboo Booth, they could get it in the mail, but there's a big difference between what it means to get something in the normal mail versus through Amazon delivery. And also, like, are you on Amazon or not? You know, all of these questions. Or picks it up themselves in a store. Are you selling through a distributor or a store? Do you have your own store? Something else that's not shown on the screen, but it's really relevant is someone gave it to me as a gift. And just really diverging and thinking about these things. Like, are you thinking about what it means for someone to get your product as a gift? And what is their interaction with your company if it's just a gift and they didn't go through all the processes in the earlier part of the funnel? So yeah, and that insight could lead to thinking about, wow, I should include something in the package that explains a little bit about our mission if you're a mission-based company, just an example. Other insights that are really relevant for this receive level of the funnel are usually questions like, okay, there's 5 different ways they could get my product, but which do they prefer and which do I prefer? Which one's better for me? And which one might be better for them, and weighing the costs and benefits of both of those. What are other ways that I'm not offering for them to get my product that I should probably think about offering? And like I just mentioned, how is it packaged and what is the experience of opening the package and all of this as well. So beyond the specific example of Bamboo Booth, just a review of everything that I've gone over so far is like we have the highest level of phases, and there are many phases, and you can invent your own as well. And you can reorder the phases for sure. Then below that we have ways. So what are the ways that people enter or go through that phase? Under the ways are the steps, and each way should have its own steps. Sometimes they'll repeat, but you should do the exercise of each one. The steps might also have branches or alternative realities like I showed on the other screen. And the number one thing about this is always be taking notes and have a column of insights in your map. So yeah, it's a lot if you've never heard about customer journeys before, but I really encourage you to try it. It doesn't have to be perfect either. I think any exercise of doing a customer journey is useful and insightful, and like you can squeeze a lot of juice out of it. And just my 3 main pieces of advice when you start trying this is 100% value divergence. Like really push yourself to like quote unquote go crazy with what you're thinking about and what ideas you're bringing to the table, and explore things you haven't explored before. Even if you know you won't pursue them, I think it's still valuable to see what's on the other side. Definitely consult with others. So I think it's useful to do this alone or with a small group of people, but then show it to other people and ask them what they might add or what they think is missing or what insights they pull from what you have listed. And always, always, always be taking the notes, because the notes are really the meat of all of this and are the insights that you can carry forward to make plans and changes and pursue new opportunities. So yeah, any questions?
There's a few in the chat, a couple.
Sure, we'll go through the chat questions.
So this one. Thanks. When launching a startup, when is it right feeling to start such an exercise? When
to start such an exercise, to when to do a customer journey. So you can there's definitely a problem if you start too soon. Like, so I said in the beginning, if you don't have it so clear what your product or service is, or if you don't have it so clear exactly which is the target customer, I would not recommend starting to do a customer journey. However, as soon as you have even an MVP version of your product, you can do a customer journey. for sure. And I think you should always do them. I think you should do them periodically. I think you should include teammates in this process as well. Yeah, I think there's a lot of value of doing it. I don't want to give a time frame, you know, like you could do one every few months, but probably once a year is pretty good. Yeah. So I would just say the only danger is starting too soon. But once you have a customer and a product or service, then definitely you can do one.
That's a very interesting one. How to come to the most large number of alternatives. And it looks that you need to be very creative and for already good insights on your potential customers, type of people, teams. Would you get a copy of the slides?
Yes, you will definitely get a copy of the slides. I can also send you guys a template, but I encourage you to use your own because it's hard to be creative when you use a template. But anyway, so yeah, there's a couple questions in here. The largest number of alternatives. This is a great question. Keep going until you can't think of anything else. I think, like I said, if you consult with other people, it helps you get new alternatives. If you look at what other businesses are doing, even if that business doesn't do anything like what you do, you can look at how they make people get aware of them. You can look at how they, what they do when a customer receives their product or service. You can look at how they encourage people to give them recommendations online or get to recommend their product or service to friends, you know? So inspiration and getting inspiration from diverse sources is a great way to get more and more and more alternatives for your map.
It's a great opportunity to involve other people, either
Exactly.
from your team, from people that you work with, people that you value, that are from your circle, and that you value their feedback, a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It is true that being creative is an asset to doing this exercise, but it doesn't mean that you have to be creative to do it. And it also doesn't mean that you can only do this exercise if you do it so exhaustively and have 50 options at every level, you know? It's like, even if you just do this exercise and have 3 or 4 things at each level, that's better than not having done it at all. Mm-hmm. And then was there anything else in there?
It was a bit what you covered. And then Roberto, any resources we can use to learn more about it, like books, websites, papers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in the follow-up, I will post about this for resources. I can just speak a little bit how I learned so much about this. I was familiar with the concept, but then I had 2 classes in my master's program. One was product road mapping, in which we talked about customer journey, and we actually used just that simple journey map that I showed about the emotions. That was my very first introduction to what it meant to have a customer journey. And the second one is I took a class about customer experience. So I've kind of tried to summarize all the key points into 1 hour, but this type of material is exhaustive. You know, you could learn about customer experience for an entire semester, if not a year. So for sure, I will share resources with you. If you want to Google certain things, though, I mean, I'm a big advocate of just seeing what's out there, reading blogs, starting to take a look at videos and stuff. Just the terms customer journey mapping, customer experience, or like detailed customer journey are really good. Yeah, but I will send you the ones I think are best, because as usual, there's a lot of stuff that's very surface level. And I think the best insights of doing customer journey is going way beyond the surface level.
For now, that's the questions I have. I don't know if anyone else has another question, if you want to add some points or.
I think so. My contact email is here, and you can also find me on our Mighty Networks community. Please reach out to me if you have questions about this. I love talking about customer journey, and of course, as a Bridge Brilliance team member, I have extreme interest in all of you succeeding and doing well. For any mentors who are on the call, I always bring this into my mentoring process as well. So if you would like to talk about that in terms of how to share this information with an entrepreneur or challenge them in certain ways as well, like please reach out.
I'm sure that after you will have questions, so feel free also to share them in the community. There's a lot of people that asked for the recording, so I don't know if you can hear me clearly because the microphone is actually here. So if you have any other questions, if you find other resources that you think are useful, share with them, share with us. Maybe we will create even an article in the community sharing resources. I think that's very good for future participants as well. Thank you so much for joining the call today as well. I know this is probably lunchtime for the majority of people that it's here, from what I think, so I won't take also longer. I want to thank Allie a lot. I really enjoyed personally. We want to also hear what you thought about the meeting. And if you have other suggestions for the future, please feel free to share with us. We really want to bring you these sessions. And well, if you have anything that you would like to share with us about the event, use the link in the community, let us know, and Allie is around. So
yeah, I hope to hear from you. Please reach out. My email's on the screen there.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.